The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
I'll give my standard intro spiel that makes it look like we're in a conversation. I've learned that from Joe Rogan. All right, listen, JSlayUSA is back, everybody. And Jeremy, I have to tell you something. Your name is probably mentioned the most on this podcast besides Greg Stoker. Do you know Greg Stoker? You know Greg, right?
Yeah. So behind the scenes, we've chatted a bit. There was a time we talked about maybe coming on each other's shows. Obviously, we align on many of the things to do with Middle East.
Right.
But historically, politically, we would be on opposite ends of the spectrum. And we even laughed about that. We have a friendly understanding that he's a communist and I'm a conservative, you know.
That's pretty hilarious. Well, the reason you're number 2 to his name being mentioned is because he helped me and the audience, for that matter, understand the difference between a liberal and a leftist. And so I think collectively we've always called them leftists and we've called it the left. And he's like, listen, when you're talking about Obama and Biden and Kamala and Hakeem Jeffries and quite frankly, everybody, those are liberals. Those are traditional liberals. And they're closer to Republicans than they are to leftists. So every time I mention the word liberal, I say, thank you, Greg Stoker. But then besides that, I do say JSlayUSA so much because I also appreciate Pastor Matt First. That was a great episode. And I think I got connected with Scott Sieverts and Burn Pit, maybe through you, or if not, anyway, he brought your name up a few times as well on our recent episode, which was really fun.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I really enjoy your show. And we've talked about this. I love your open-hearted approach. You seem from the very beginning very unbiased and more curious. And I think that's where everybody, regardless of their biases, we should always be curious. We shouldn't lose that because that's when we can be tricked by our own party and our own biases. People will use that against us. And I think, we can bring this up again later, but I think that's what Israel realizes. Wow, we've got a bunch of, the modern Likud party and others. I think it's been a long running plan, but I think they have seen, wow, we've got, there may only be 6 million of us in Israel, but there's 100 million evangelical Christians in America, or 50 million, whatever, way more than their own numbers. And that's an army. That's an army of support. Let's nurture their biases because they don't think we can do wrong. And man, what a recipe to be used and taken advantage of by a foreign nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I've learned first of all, thank you for that. And I've learned so much about, the religion of the United States of America and religion in the United States of America. And in all honesty, I've learned a lot from you. And so let's talk about that evangelical Christian world. Like I love when you send me things to look at. You're like, hey, check out this pastor. This is exactly where I was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so let me ask you this. I mean, these evangelicals, do they really believe this stuff? Is it so ingrained in them? And let's start with the pastors, the ones preaching it. Are they really that brainwashed into thinking that, Israel is God's chosen people and just all of the stuff? And again, this is real talk. I think we're past the point of feeling uncomfortable talking about this. Are these pastors believing this stuff, or are they doing it because they're getting a paycheck and they're on retainer with somebody?
Yeah. Well, I think most of the time there's no official agreements. There's no official retainer, things like that. That's 1 in 100, maybe, that there's something like that going on where there's actually some kickback in some way. Okay. I do think that the majority of the time it is a true belief. And it is not, they're not having to fake it. However, I think that you have to take it on a case by case basis. I think that the majority of what's happened is they used to be all in where they really believed it. Now that there's people like me, and it's not just me, there's a lot of people like me that are bringing up things that they can't quite deny or that they've never really even looked at, like the USS Liberty. And
Right.
let's use that as an example because it's such a stark one. They'll be presented with that. They'll want to quickly protect their theology. So the first thing they're doing, what can we look up to tell us that the USS Liberty was an accident, that it was not intentional? Well, Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager are right there, ready and willing to say this was an accident, and it's used by anti-Semites to say that Israel has some kind of stranglehold over America, even to the point we could bomb one of their top intelligence ships and get away with it and cover it up. Like, we would never do that. You're our greatest ally. So they'll quickly find that stuff, and then that's enough. It's like, that's enough. I'm going to stop digging. Okay. It's really hard for both the people in the pews, so the Christians that attend the churches, and for the ministers who have been honestly come to believe a lot of these things, because the deception is a really long thing. Okay. It's been a really long time. You could say that medical, the real push for childhood vaccines and stuff, that's been 2, 3, 4 decades of indoctrination now. Okay. Since they really, cause you go back 3 decades when I was a kid, there was like a couple vaccines, 7 maybe. Now the schedule is like, well, here's 74 different vaccines that your child needs. That has been a process over decades. So that's a long time. So for them, with COVID and with all of the deception that was so obvious to those who chose to pull themselves out of the bias, they decided, I'm not going to be cognitive dissonant. I'm going to use my brain.
Yeah.
They had there was a price to be paid for it. But if you were in the medical community, you could lose your job over it. If you were a doctor, you absolutely could be blacklisted from your hospital and who you get your paycheck from. If you'd written books based on the topic of vaccines in a pro way, imagine turning around on that and saying, I was fooled by these international institutions and by the pharmaceutical companies who and those people are powerful. Well, now imagine it's not medical, it's spiritual and theological. So you're not going against a medical doctor anymore or a hospital. You're going against your pastor who you respect and your church community and the social life involved with that. It's even harder. Okay.
That's an amazing analogy you just made. Like, thinking about, and I don't even know where you netted out on COVID, because we didn't know each other then. So you can share that in a second. But like, that's an amazing analogy. And you're totally right. There are those doctors. And actually, gosh, I don't know if you've had them on, or I'm definitely going to try, like Dr. Peter McCullough, and who else? Dr. Robert Malone. Maybe you've had some of these guys on.
I've had Peter McCullough on twice.
You have. Okay. So he really, I mean, man, he was really going against everything and was really crushed. So that's an incredible analogy to say, now the folks like yourself, like maybe Pastor Matt First, Pastor Steven Anderson, Pastor Chuck Baldwin that we've talked about, and we're going to get him on hopefully together and do a show with him.
Right. Yes.
These guys, very similar to the medical doctors that were willing to even ask questions about the COVID vaccine. Man, so they're getting crushed. And like, tell us about your relationship. Like, I know things have changed for you in the Christian community.
Do you mind if I stop and make a point about those pastors that have chosen to make a change?
I would love that.
So almost all of those guys, there are people who are brought up in the school of the Reformed theology that don't buy into dispensationalism.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Catholics that never bought into it because it did not infiltrate.
Never bought into dispensationalism. Okay.
Yes. Or the rapture, or modern day Israel being, Abraham and God's chosen people.
Got it. And really quick, for anyone new listening who may not have heard this before, can you give just and actually, this is crazy, but I probably can as well. But can you give a top line on dispensationalism, a real like basic, so people know what that is?
Yeah. Well, it's a man-made system of stages throughout history, okay, that were all God ordained. All right. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that piece of it, that, hey, maybe there are these stages throughout human history where God deals with people or his people in various ways and asks different things of us. For instance, the Old Testament would be the Old Covenant. We got to keep the law. And it was still based around faith, though. You go to the New Testament and the law was merely meant to paint a picture of Jesus Christ, who embodied the word. He embodied the law. And, he said, the law and the prophets are fulfilled in me. Right. And so now the approach is we follow him rather than we follow a set of rules. So that would be an example of two, if you want to call it dispensations, I would call those covenants. But John Nelson Darby back in the 1830s came up with an organized system. It had been floated by some various people. Interestingly enough, Jesuit priests were trying to infiltrate Protestant theology, and they were throwing in all these things with books. John Nelson Darby took a lot of that stuff, put it together into a system, called it dispensationalism, and he flat out said, I am the originator of this system. And he said, we have to be careful when disseminating this information because it's like new wine. And if you put new wine into old wineskins, it'll burst. And he's like, this scares people. So these ideas of the rapture are new. This idea of all of the Jews returning to Israel and we must bless them in order to be blessed. Now he didn't think it was new. He thought he'd rediscovered it after, 1,000+ years since the fall of the temple. So he basically was saying, in that sense, I have rediscovered something and I'm reanimating something and now remarketing it to the church, but I got to be careful because it's going to feel brand new. Okay.
Was John Nelson Darby Jewish or Christian, or what was that guy?
No, he was a part of the Anglican Church, which you'd think more of English Catholic back then. And he left that church probably for good reason. But he got connected with a group called the Plymouth Brethren. All right. And the Plymouth Brethren, most of them were heavily influenced by, I should say, the Jewish neighborhoods of England at the time. John Nelson Darby's father worked on Old Jewry Street in London. So there was like a real soft spot they had for the Jewish people. One of them even had a ministry trying to convert Jews to Christianity, which I think is a good thing. But that got swallowed up in the idea of Darby, where he went so far as to say, listen, the Jews, based on their genetics, they're God's chosen people in an earthly sense. Christians are God's chosen people in a heavenly sense. And he also went so far as to say, at the end of the day, my entire system is really about Zion and Israel. So you can't minimize the importance of the nation state of Israel, their intentions, the millennial kingdom. You'll hear a lot of people talk about that. Darby's that was his focal point, and everything else that he created called dispensationalism, those 7 chapters, were all the outflow of that central nugget. So it was extremely important. But if I can, let me finish my point on those pastors.
Yeah.
All of those you mentioned, Matt First, Chuck Baldwin,
Stephen
others.
Anderson, yeah, all those guys.
They all started dispensationalists, just like I did. Okay, I'm not a pastor, but they all. So these guys had a choice to make in the stream of their career, professionally and personally and theologically, and they kind of. There could have been things that they realized, like with the USS Liberty, that seems really odd, and they look into that, or 9/11, that seems really like there was a lot of Jewish influence. Yeah. I didn't know that. But also just opening your Bible and reading it from an unbiased perspective, especially the New Testament. There are some verses that may lend themselves to a genetic importance, okay? If you're reading it from a certain way, that would say, okay, the genetic, geographic location and people of Israel is the people that call themselves Jews today. And you got to kind of do some gymnastics there mentally and spiritually, but you can get there. However, that's probably 15%, I would say, of the verses that say now the church is the new Israel. That's spiritual Israel. The veil of the synagogue was torn in two, so it no longer required a rabbinic priest. It's now the Gentiles may enter too. There's verse after verse after verse. And a very important one is the first time John the Baptist speaks when Jesus, or right before Jesus approaches, and the Pharisees come up to John the Baptist because they weren't sure if they liked him either. Okay. And Jesus said John the Baptist was the greatest man, the greatest prophet ever born of a woman. So obviously Jesus Christ thought a lot of John the Baptist. John the Baptist's first words to the leaders of Judaism, or it wasn't even called Judaism then, but Israel at the time, the Pharisees. He said, what do you think is going to save you from the wrath to come? You put a burden on people. And he said, if you think that because you say your father is Abraham, that will save you, you're wrong. From out of these stones, I could raise up children of Abraham. So imagine now today, someone like me saying, you know what, your ethnicity doesn't matter. It's about your faith. And it's about, God, John the Baptist said, from out of these stones, he could raise up children of Abraham. Obviously, it's not as important as pastors like Greg Locke. And, I don't want to dig into names too much because a lot of them know me, including Greg. But, and I'm not trying to unnecessarily start controversies, but you can find these guys easy because it's 90% or 80% of the evangelical Christian church. They would have a real problem with John the Baptist telling that to Benjamin Netanyahu today.
Wow. Okay. Man, so there really is there's a real divide right now in America, don't you think? I mean, I still think maybe, I don't think it's 50-50 right now, but there's a real divide between two groups of Christians. And let me explain what I see and tell me if I'm right or wrong. I see one group of Christians that are still the same. They believe kind of that Protestant Judeo-Christian mindset, which is the nation state of Israel, God's chosen people, everything Benjamin Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, all these guys say. Marco Rubio, actually Trump's entire administration for that matter. And then there's the group that, again, forget even the pastors or even, somewhat prominent people like yourself. Regular Christians are kind of like, wait a minute, we think it is moved to Jesus Christ as being the person that you have to believe in as your Lord and Savior. And if you do, then you are part of God's chosen people. Is that kind of an accurate way to think about it?
It is an accurate way to think about it. I think the people that are my opposition now, the Christian Zionists, would say to your second point of Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and you need to know him to come to the Father. They would say, I fully agree with that. You're right. You're just wrong that the church doesn't replace Israel because Israel still got their old covenant, and that's running parallel in the background alongside. So we have to honor both covenants at the same time.
Both covenants. Okay. The Old Testament is Israel, Old Covenant. Israel's God's chosen people. The New Testament is Christians are God's chosen people, the new covenant. But those Zionists want both, whereas in reality, to me, it seems there really only should be the new covenant.
Well, there's a reason that Jesus turned to his disciples who were all Jewish before his death, and he said, today I give you a new covenant. Okay, so he wasn't talking to the Gentiles. He was talking to his Jewish disciples.
Yeah.
He said from his own lips, today I give you a new covenant. And there were so many other things. The book of Hebrews is almost all about this new covenant. So, throughout the Bible, there is neither Jew nor Gentile. There's neither slave nor free. All are equal at the foot of the cross. So that's why dispensationalism and these ideas are rather new. Now, are very new, really, in the big scheme of things. Were there strains of people or groups or denominations going way, way back to the first century or whatever that did hold this special place for the Jewish people and did kind of somewhat have this dispensational view? Sure. They were never in the mainstream. It was typically always an offshoot group of this or that. But one of the big problems with the church, and this is where this would make a lot of professional Christians really angry to hear this, but it's true. One of the big reasons that the Jewish people got kicked out of all those countries, 109 plus, and that they've been persecuted so much. I'm not going to say there's not hate against the Jewish people because there has been, but it's not for the reason that we're being told. So when these intellectuals and theologians and leaders of the modern day Christian church look at people like me or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson, and they say, this is a sickness of Satan, this anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, anti-Semitism, it's of Satan. And that's why the Jews are always been under persecution, even though at the same time, they're supposed to be blessed. They're always under persecution. The truth is, it didn't come out of thin air.
Yeah.
What drives things like anti-Semitism is when something like the USS Liberty attack happens, people like me find out about it. We realize that not only did it happen and it killed over 30 service members of our armed forces, but it wounded over 100. I've met survivors of it. They've been very confused because all the churches are telling them just to bless Israel, and they were getting napalmed by Israel.
Yeah.
Then Lyndon Johnson and our government at the time says, we're not going to embarrass our greatest ally. We're going to cover this up. So they cover it up. Then you go to the pastors and you tell that story, and their response is, we have to bless God's people who are the modern day Jews. Israel would never do that. That's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And if you go down that road, you are listening to Satan. What that sounds like is spiritual hocus pocus, superstition. Yeah. And it does drive real anti-Semitism because there's people that are seeing these things that are not nearly as charitable as me. Yeah. And they see what the Jewish elites around the world are getting away with, and they see the tribalism involved and how they always keep themselves separate and they do, if you read their writings. They don't have any interest in, what's the word when you acclimatize yourself within a culture of another nation?
What's the word for that? Oh my gosh.
Well, you get what I'm saying. I'll think of the name of it. But I mean, you read the works of the rabbis, and I've read many books, a few hundred years old of the rabbis. They're in Spain, they're in Germany, they're in Russia. They want to keep a wall of partition between them and everybody else, even if they look just like the people around them. It's not like black and white here. You know, if you didn't know who Benjamin Netanyahu was and he told you he was a granddad from Mississippi, you'd probably just believe him. You know, it's not like they look a whole lot like Arabs. Now, there's some that do. But so I'm getting a little off topic, but the point I'm trying to make here is we need more people, not just people like me with a smallish to middling platform who's a Christian saying it. We need others like Chuck Baldwin who've maybe written entire books around this and taught Sunday school classes and given sermons to one day get in front of their congregation and said, you know what, we have been right about a lot of things at this church and within this ministry. That's not bragging. I thank God for that. There's an area that now we're looking at again. And because there's too many good questions being asked that we're not willing to answer. And we don't need to, as Christians and as rational people who are supposed to use our brain that God gave us. Yeah. We don't need to be throwing out superstition and claims of hate because that's what they would claim the progressive left does. Yes, that's not what Christians should do, who are willing to say, okay, there is the Bible that we look at as a source of truth. There's also God's rational and intelligible universe. And if I see something in front of me, right in front of me, but my pastor's telling me that didn't happen because the Bible told him that shouldn't happen, but I saw it right in front of me, I'm going to go with my eyes and I'm going to look at that scripture and say, this may be where the pastor's not reading this correctly, because I just saw it happen in front of me.
Do Christians question their pastors? I mean, let's say before the past 2 years, I think things have really changed because of October 7th and all that. But prior to that, like, do most Christians grow up with a mentality of even questioning your pastor, or is kind of what the pastor says sort of God's word?
Yeah, it depends on the culture of the church. All right. One of the greatest examples of this is the whole reason that we have the Protestant defection from the Catholic Church. Martin Luther got sick and tired of the corruption and people not being willing or able to actually read the Bible. He thought that was wrong. He translated it into German for the common man. And he saw enough problems. He said, we need a reformation. We need to reform this. So not only was he questioning, because he was asking permission early on. He was like, will you please look at my ideas? And they were giving it a chance up front, but it took too much power away from the existing Catholic leadership. And they finally said, you're out. You're a defector. You're out. Well, today in America, it depends on the culture of that church and the personality of the individual. Because I've been around, a lot of people have never left Tennessee, for instance. They've gone to one type of church their whole life. And maybe they've been lucky enough that they've not seen any major faith-shaking scandal within that church. So they've got a reason to trust. And they've maybe seen a lot of good ministry things. They've seen God work in their own life. And then they're told that modern day Israel's God's chosen people and that they should wear a Star of David alongside their cross. They're not going to question that. And they're going to see what I'm saying and immediately think anti-Semite. Why would he be saying that? And then they're told if they say that, it's because it's just like any other temptation to sin. The temptation is to commit the sin of anti-Semitism, which had never been said in the Bible until Schofield's notes in the 67 version that came out. He said, for a nation to not support the nation state of Israel is to commit the sin of anti-Semitism. So it's not mentioned in the Bible, but it's in Schofield's notes.
Schofield's notes. Okay. Man, that Schofield Bible was important. That thing really changed things. I think it was 1917, actually. I think it was well before 67.
1909.
Yeah, 1909, exactly. Okay. Oh, very interesting. All right. So let me ask you this, man. How are you doing with all of this? Because dude, it's not easy. I see some of the things, honestly, some of the things I feel like you're going through on social media even. And you've been you wear your heart on your sleeve in a lot of your social media posts. You're different than me. You're actually sometimes walking around your neighborhood at nights, which, by the way, great job getting those steps in. I'm a big step count guy. But you're walking around getting those steps in and you'll turn your camera on and you'll talk to camera. I don't really do stuff like that. But when I see you doing that, man, it's so heartfelt and it's almost like Ed TV. Remember that movie Ed TV where I do. But I feel like I'm watching that with you, but man, sometimes I'm like, oh God, dude, I feel for you because you're really I don't want to say you're in a battle, but I don't know. You tell us.
It's a battle.
Yeah.
It's a battle. After I got in the fight, you asked me about COVID earlier.
Yeah.
I knew immediately that something was deceptive and wrong with the way that COVID was being handled and the fear mongering and how we're seeing these movies from, or these video clips from China and people are just falling over in the street because of COVID.
Yeah.
Later on, we found out that never happens because of COVID. You slowly get the flu and then it's a matter of how bad does it get. Right.
Right.
And then, the masks and all. So I quickly began to dig on that. I was with Trump for a while we should probably get that Operation Warp Speed. And plus I was fighting for Trump on so many other fronts.
Yeah.
That I didn't have time to I think he was in the same boat at the time, actually, where he didn't know enough, maybe, or maybe he did.
Yeah.
But it's just we got to get, man, this guy needs a win and get the Operation Warp Speed. It seems like the left and the right would appreciate that because then people have the option of getting vaccinated. So I went through that war, which you're told if you don't get vaccinated and wear masks to the grocery store, you're going to kill grandma. So that was hard. Honestly, right in the thick of that for about a year, it was, going into Home Depot and walking around is you either feel bold that day and you just do it and you're like, screw it, I'm not wearing this mask. And people can say whatever. Other days you still don't wear the mask because you're just not going to do it. Yeah. But you feel less confident, right?
Yes.
So I did it with that. I did it with BLM and I lost some friends and some relationships over my stance and exposure of the origins of critical race theory and how it's repackaged communist ideas, that didn't quite work out with Karl Marx, but the Frankfurt School, a mostly Jewish-led school in Germany, yada, yada. I could go on and on, but I fought that battle. Okay. Then I fought the election in
So you were on social media fighting all those battles. Cause I honestly have not started really talking on social media besides maybe the past,
year
18 months. Yeah, something like that. But so you've been doing it for this entire time, starting with COVID, then to BLM. Okay. That's
COVID away. I was not a believer that 9/11 was an inside job. There was a lot of stuff I just took.
You were not. Oh,
a lot of things I just took on faith of there's a good side and a bad side. I'm on the good side being a conservative Republican. And even though there is occasional uniparty type stuff that I can't make sense of or whatever, generally we're getting the truth from the right wing. That's where I landed. But when COVID happened and I saw an international agreed upon deception.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget those Facebook posts from mostly liberals that were really in support of all the mandates. They're like, so you really think that all the news channels, all the social media channels, all of the international medical institutions, all the colleges, both political parties, Donald Trump, and, are all lying to you at the same time? Like,
yes.
Why would they? And the thing is, it was at first, when you first see that, you're like, I've never seen an agreed upon locked arms deception before.
Yeah.
And then you do digging and you read the Rockefeller plan that included Operation Lockstep, which was, how do we get everybody on board to herd the masses of people into a certain way of thinking that supports these elites? And they were looking at germ warfare, which would have been like COVID or whatever, viruses. There was international terrorism. Like, we can use these things or channel these things. But they named that part of the Rockefeller plan Operation Lockstep. Here's the players we got to have on board to do it, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Then so I don't want to get too far off on COVID, but you asked me, how's it been for you? Right before October 7th, I'd gone through all these, what I would consider pretty good sized battles.
Yeah.
I had already been getting hip and knowledgeable to the Jewish deceptions, including the theological ones of our Bible.
Okay.
And the nation state of Israel and the Rothschilds. And, you just on and on it goes. October 7th happened. And my immediate thought was, because I knew that Israel was having a lot of internal unrest.
Right.
And that Netanyahu might even get ousted.
Right.
And immediately Netanyahu begins to call it their 9/11 immediately.
Right.
And they're showing all these scenes of horrific acts, which sometimes are blurred, sometimes are not, whatever. But then they're showing, then I see Ben Shapiro like posting lies, similar, with like, here's the burned baby from, and it's got the whole blurred burned baby. And then you realize, like, oh my gosh, he used an AI image with the doctor's got 6 fingers. Like, you remember that?
I totally remember that. That was all such, it was on purpose too. The burned babies, the 40 babies in ovens, the beheaded babies, all of those lies that happened October 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, that whipped this thing like it was like a slingshot that shot it. And literally, and I want to be very clear on this, all of those have been debunked. Every single one of them have been debunked, including Ben Shapiro having posted an AI picture of a burnt dog that he said was a baby. There was so much manipulation with that.
There was. And anytime, and that does not mean, and I'll make both sides mad here, but that does not mean that there weren't horrific acts caused by Hamas Islamic terrorism that day. Okay.
100%.
However, what I realized, once you wrap your head around 9/11 or the USS Liberty, and you understand that these Jewish elites are smart enough and brutal enough to cause, they don't mind getting attacked from time to time because it totally justifies their next move. And every single time Hamas or the PLO before them has attacked Israel with usually, let's say that they did kill, I'm going to say 800 Israelis that day. That's a horrible thing. In turn, has that helped Gaza? Has that helped the West Bank? Has that helped international Islam? Has it? No. What it's done is it's gotten Gaza wiped out, and it's gotten Israel this much closer to what Jared Kushner wants, which is the Greater Israel Project, and the Adelsons. They want that as well. They're doing $100 million deals with Donald Trump to make sure it gets done. It's so obvious if you're willing to look. So on October 8th, because I had one day where all I did was listen. October 7th, I listened. October 8th, I knew this is a green flag operation. It's not what do they call
it's not a false flag, or it is a false flag?
There you go. Yeah. It's a partial flag. A green flag operation is when you know it's coming, you approve of it, and you allow it to happen. Okay.
I love it. Yeah.
That's a military term too, a green flag operation.
Green flag. Okay. Got it.
As opposed to a true enemy coming in and surprise attacking you.
Yeah.
Where you're like caught off guard. Now they say they were caught off guard. there's way too much evidence that they were not.
It's impossible for them to have been caught off guard by a bunch of dudes in hang gliders. It's like,
I
how
know.
are you caught off guard by a bunch of guys in hang gliders? But then a year later, when supposedly Iran fires 300 ballistic missiles that are traveling at the speed of light, you intercept all of those ballistic missiles. But like dudes on hang gliders, they skate right through. It's just nonsense.
So I had that decision to make October 8th. Am I really going to fight this one? Because this could be the biggest and hardest one yet. And I immediately told myself, like, yes, my heart is I know enough about this topic, and I've got a unique perspective, being that I've always been an Israel supporter, always, and pro-Zionist and pro-Greater Israel Project, even though I'd never heard the Schofield Bible. I'd never heard of dispensationalism. I barely knew the word Zionism, and that's on purpose.
That's amazing, dude. That's amazing. So really, gosh, your I don't even want to say conversion or awakening, whatever word you want to call it. This is very recent.
Yeah, well, the academic and theological understanding of what was really going on had been in the works for probably 12 to 18 months prior to October 7th.
Got it.
But I had not spoken out on it.
Got it.
All right.
Got it.
But I knew enough at that point. And the big one again for me, 9/11 was huge. When I dug into 9/11 and I realized this helped Israel more than any other country in the world, and not by accident. It's not like they just got lucky. They talked about it. They had plans with our CIA, and you can find, it's like, nobody's ever going to find a handwritten note or a document, because this would be, even if there was such a thing, it had been destroyed. Nobody's going to say this is between Donald Rumsfeld and Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996, when they're discussing how they're going to manipulate the media after 9/11 in order to use CNN and Fox News to get everybody to believe that it's Osama bin Laden, that he masterminded it. Like, you're never going to find that document. But what you will find is coincidence after coincidence after coincidence after who benefited, over and over and over again. And then you do see certain things, like when Netanyahu went on TV in the late 90s and said, if this keeps happening, I'll tell you what, they will probably attack the trade centers with a bomb.
Yes.
And
he
you're
put
like,
that in his book too. He literally wrote a book.
of all cities, of all buildings, they're going to attack the trade centers. And dude, I mean, this may be a place to kind of get into it a little bit, but once 9/11 happened and you realize it's a false flag, that's not what our government's telling us. That's the first rung on the ladder people have to get to, is like, this is a lie that's being held with locked arms by all the institutions and the powers that be, including Donald Trump. Okay.
Yes.
The next rung, because then you want to know who did it, who benefited. And all signs point to our favorite ally that I'm not supposed to question. Then you realize they have the perfect angle and stranglehold to have every good-hearted, naive American Christian that doesn't even think to question them. It's the one place you're not allowed to look.
Right.
I could say Germany did it. I could say Russia. I could say China, any country, but not that one.
Right.
You say that one, you're going to piss off everybody that's in the institutions. All the Fox News pundits would no longer allow me on their show for saying what I'm saying right now. I'm blacklisted. No pastor would ever let me come to the podium and speak with a mic, because I am saying something that goes against what they're theologically allowed to believe.
Got it.
And then the further you zoom the camera back, you're like, this is insane. And then you see evidence after evidence of it. I mean, there's an intellectual out there that I respect on a lot of fronts. I probably mentioned his name to you. His name's Eric Metaxas. I've got a lot of his books. I like the guy, but he is sold out to Israel, and he knows of me. He knows of some of my friends that have a big name in his circles that stand where I stand. But he refuses to actually grapple publicly with the questions. Instead, it's just, I support Israel. Do you not think, remember when the JFK files came out?
Yes.
This 2-3 months ago?
Yes.
And we realized, okay, a lot of these files had already been out, but they unredacted most, if not all, the stuff that they actually put out there. So for the first time, all the black lines are removed, or at least most of them, from these documents. And then you realize they covered over anything to do with Israel or Mossad.
Yeah.
Or
they still did, right? Like they unredacted a bunch, but then they still covered those, or did they uncover that?
Well, won't, if they're still covered, if there's still the black lines, then we don't know what's behind it.
Got it.
But it would say there would be like black lines that had been removed, just redacted for the public as of 3 months ago. And it would say things about, elite. We've got the elite Jewish banking money on our side. We can pull this off. Then at the bottom, there'd be an unredacted note that would say, please remove anything to do with the Jewish nation of Israel or international Jewry, like remove that. So we realize this has been the thing that they redacted even about JFK's assassination.
Yeah.
And yet I haven't heard one pro-Zionist person, be it Officer Tatum or Eric Metaxas or one of these big time well-known preachers, be like, I got to admit, it really makes us look bad, or it makes the nation of Israel look bad that they keep covering up things about Israel or the Jewish people. That I see now maybe why Jeremy's asking questions, and maybe he's not influenced by Satan. Maybe he's actually just followed evidence to where it led, and it led to an uncomfortable place.
Yeah. So why do you think those guys are not even willing to entertain that thought process? Do they really, are they really that brainwashed, or do they know where their bread is buttered or their matzah is buttered?
Yeah. Well, brainwashing goes a long way. It really does. So let's give some credibility to brainwashing. That will keep people from asking questions. But I think the other 50% of it is fear, pride, and money. Fear, pride, and money.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose my following. I'll lose the reputation that I have.
Yeah.
I will lose the funding of the big pro-Zionists at my church, or the elite Jewish funders like, Charlie Kirk. He don't want to lose elite Jews.
No, he does not. And what's funny about Charlie? Gosh, for some reason, I feel like he has the ability to recognize this, and I think he has recognized it. But then he went on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, in November of 2023, and he raised some incredibly interesting points. I've actually posted these where he said, it took 6 hours for the IDF to respond. I don't believe it. Was there a stand down order? And then he's like, maybe if you don't think Netanyahu was in on it, but was there a stand down order? And then he got crushed the next week on social media. And since then, he's been completely the opposite. So when you look at that situation, you're like, okay, he actually told the truth on Patrick Bet-David in November of 2023. And now, since then, he's completely been on the other direction. There was pressure put on him.
Absolutely. Well, he would know, he's coming to my hometown of Murfreesboro, I believe late September. There's this conference called the Culture and Christianity Conference being put on by World Outreach Church, which again, kudos to them. They do some great things, both for the Christian faith, spreading the gospel, and culturally. But on this issue, this pastor has been labeled the 4th biggest Zionist pastor in America.
Wow.
He's the one that personally taught me Zionism without ever using that word. Okay.
Wow.
And I like him. I do. But Charlie Kirk, if he kept going down that road of asking those questions and potentially coming up with some answers that wouldn't have been convenient, he never would get invited to this conference.
Yeah.
But there's a shift happening, because you see at Turning Point USA's own America Fest recently, he had some dissenting voices, like Dave Smith and some others.
Yeah, Dave Smith, Tucker Carlson, even Megyn Kelly. I'm actually surprised he had those on, because he knew they were going to be dissenting voices. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, Charlie Kirk is playing a little 4D chess. He can't say it, but he's going to let Tucker, Dave Smith, Megyn Kelly say it. What do you think?
My personal thought is no, it's not that. It's covering your ass, because while he has institutional investors, he also has a following mostly of college age and young professional kids and some high school kids.
Yeah.
They are not Zionist for the most part.
Yeah.
They're willing to hear voices like mine and take it seriously. And those voices are becoming so loud, and they're embarrassing Charlie because he has to continue to promote God's chosen people and all of these platitudes rather than actually answering the hard questions.
Okay.
So to me, Tucker is going to some degree, ask questions about Israel. Okay. Dave Smith is Jewish.
Yeah.
And he's a good, I'm not taking away from their voice on this, but they are going to, the best example is Tucker. Tucker's going to say everything he says and then follow that with, and I love Israel. I take my family to Israel. I love Israel.
That's exactly
to me,
right. It's
a smart play for Charlie, because if he just completely ignores it with his audience, they're going to turn away from him. They're going to be like, you're an idiot. You're lying. Just come on. We've got real questions. So he's throwing a bone, maybe a couple of bones, quickly getting back to his own messaging, though. If you've seen his recent stuff, very hardcore pro-Israel, pro-Zionist again. All right.
Yeah.
So he allowed a little bit in the door. So it's somewhat a 4D chess, but for his own benefit, not necessarily for the truth.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're totally right. I think whereas in my mind, gosh, I was giving him maybe a little more credit than he deserves. I think you're totally right. It's for his own benefit. And it's almost because he knows his audience is going to call him out and probably leave him if he doesn't do some of that stuff.
Here's the difference. If he had Dave Smith or Tucker, or let's just say Tucker Carlson or Jeremy Slayden on his show. First of all, if he would have had me, he would have had a way better, following at the event. Lots more people to sign up.
Absolutely. And a much better billboard, JSlayUSA. That
you got it. Yeah. We would. No, but Tucker's going to say we should ask the questions. We should have free speech, even if it's about Israel. Now let's go love up on Israel some more. But also, like, let's make sure we don't kill Palestinians needlessly, even though he's got no power to change that.
Right.
Where I would say Israel did 9/11. Here's why.
Yeah.
And does this mean we should be going to war with Netanyahu right now? Like, So what Charlie's doing, and a lot of them are doing this, and it is 4D chess to a degree. They want to put caps on the outsides of the debate we're allowed to have. So here's Charlie and Officer Tatum and others. Here is Megyn Kelly and maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene and some others, which again, I'm proud of them for what they are saying, but it's like, okay, here's the end caps. So anything outside of that discussion is verboten. It's forbidden. You're crazy if you're outside of this paradigm.
Okay. All right. So I'll tell you who's outside of that paradigm, and let's see if you can guess. I think you can. One guy, right? Nick Fuentes. Dude, that kid is a problem. He is a problem. And I say that's what the young kids say about like really good basketball players. They'll be like, LaMelo Ball is a problem. Nick Fuentes is a problem for all of them. And I would love your thoughts on him.
Yeah, probably the most intelligent geopolitical thinker of our times. And he's 26. Like just leave it there. Right. And it's because he started at, 16, 17, 18 years old. He was one of the young members of the UN, whatever that is, where you're learning about geopolitics. And he was, if you watch I actually really appreciated the part on his Candace interview where she gave him 15 minutes to fully lay out his past, because I didn't know it. And I'm like, okay, I've always wondered like how he knows this much about like all these, like who the vice prime minister of some random country was in the 80s. Like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
Well, this was his passion since he was a teenager. So it'd be like me learning the nuances of baseball and the baseball swing. And I could talk for hours about these things that other people are like, what, unless you're a player, why do you even care?
Right. Absolutely.
He's been a player for a long time. Now, along with that are some other things you have to swallow that may or may not be agreeable. He's full on Catholic and believes that Catholicism is the way. while he's not going to deny my Christianity, but he's going to say, really, Jeremy, like, if you want to go all, you need to be Catholic. That, you know, he just say,
what is that? What does that mean? Like if he says you need to be Catholic, what is it that you're not doing as a Christian that he's doing as a Catholic?
Yeah. Well, an easy one, I can't answer all of that, but an easy one would be, he calls the Pope, he believes the Pope is very important. He calls the Pope the vicar of Christ on earth, which I guess that means like the image bearer. I think we are all image bearers of God. We are all, you know, so my view of the Vatican, the Pope, that hierarchy, that they give papal authority equal weight with scriptural authority, or at least close to, no way. No way.
Got it. Okay. So, that's a great example, because I do think the Pope is in the middle of the Catholic religion, whereas with Christianity or other forms of Protestant denominations, I don't think the Pope plays as vital of a role. And I don't know about Orthodox.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to get into all that, but I brought up, there's other things you've got to swallow. If you're going, you know, you don't have to swallow it. I would say take the good, which his geopolitical analysis and his unwavering, unfearful perspective and approach toward international elite Jewry and what they are able to accomplish tribally around the world, and where it's a problem.
Yeah. His ability to articulate that as a 26, I think he actually just turned 27, a 27-year-old kid is insane. It's insane. Scott Liebert said he's a generational talent. He's like, you know, someone like Rush Limbaugh. I never listened to Rush Limbaugh, but the way Scott put it, he's like, Rush could go and Nick can go. I mean, that kid will do a 3-hour rumble, which I don't think is edited very much at all. And he's doing that on a daily basis. I mean, I think it's insane. I think the knock on him 5 years ago, during maybe COVID, when he was on this Clubhouse app and a few other things, was that he was a total white supremacist and all that. I don't even know if that's true, to be honest with you, because what's interesting to me right now is I see a ton of Black people supporting the shit out of him. Even Latinos, everyone's supporting the kid. He's a problem for these guys.
And that, you know, to be honest, and that changes you too. And I think it's probably, you know, like the Hodge twins really like Nick and they laugh with him.
Yeah.
They know that Nick 100% believes that a majority Black nation is not going to fare as well economically, intellectually. He'll flat out say it. The Hodge twins will be like, you know, a lot of people hate you for that, Nick, but I can't argue with it. You know, like,
I know.
And then they both laugh. That helps Nick change too, I think, to a degree.
Yeah.
But Nick would also tell you that, you know, like just like in 100-meter sprint, it's almost always all Black guys in the Olympics, almost always.
Yeah.
Occasionally there's a really fast a white dude that makes the cut, you know. This is going to be a crude example, but you flip that into nation building and stuff like that, or into, you know, are people going to be on par with Nick intellectually? Probably not even on par, but able to hold a conversation. Yeah, of course, Candace Owens can hold a conversation with him and the Hodge twins. And now Candace doesn't like him and she tries to distance herself from him for this reason, because his white supremacism, nationalism. But the problem that he is in that is he's able to back up his points very well.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's hard. And if you come from the very nice, the very cultured, even hard right Christianity, which is not supposed to be all nice, when it comes to racism or we've just had it so beat in our head that racism is like the worst sin. And of those, the anti-Semitism is the worst of the worst, to the point where you can struggle with all these different things in your life. And you're not going to be, in fact, you're going to be considered honest by talking about your problems or at church, right? Or saying I struggle with this or whatever. But if you're a white nationalist or a supremacist or whatever, that's going to get you blackballed or blacklisted pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think part of that is because with those other areas, you are acknowledging it's a problem. He's not acknowledging that it's a problem. He's saying, no, I'm just being honest. And I do agree with him. He had a great line the other day. He said, you know, people try to, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying all this truth now.
Yeah.
Okay. But she's framing it as it's not anti-Semitic to question or even disagree with the secular nation of Israel. Okay. True enough on its face, but what is she actually saying? What does that even mean? Because the truth is, it is a nation built around a certain people group and a certain religion. And it's been, they call it the Jewish state. It's been unapologetically that.
Right.
So the thing is, anti-Semitism is a word that is used and been used for decades to beat people down from having any questions. And we're kind of done with that. And the more important question is not, is this anti-Semitic? It's, is it true? Because if you could say I'm racist for pointing at murder statistics between whites and blacks, and that there's been, much higher percentage of blacks murdering whites than vice versa.
And blacks murdering blacks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But you're going to have less white people murdering black people than the other way around. It just is what it is. And I get the anti-racist crowd would scream from the rooftops that me just saying that on a show is highly racist and that I should be banned and canceled and all that. Same thing goes for anti-Semitism. It's not me saying the USS Liberty was an attack on our own naval ship by the Israeli government and covered up by the Zio-controlled politicians in America. It's not whether that's anti-Semitic. Is it true? And if it's true, then we've got a problem to solve here.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, it's almost like, and I'll ask you this in the Christian community, like, is racism considered worse or anti-Semitism considered worse?
Oh, anti-Semitism.
Really?
Even though they mean the same thing.
Yeah. And when I say racism, I'm talking about against black people. So is it like worse to be mean to black people or mean to be to Jewish people?
That's the thing. And the people will disagree. Very rarely in my whole life, being surrounded by Christian circles, do I find normal church-going Christians being mean to black people. Like, it just doesn't. Yeah. As a matter of fact, most nice church-going Christians are scared to death to offend black people, especially during the BLM era, where they're walking on eggshells trying to make sure they don't say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So this idea, which is worse, being mean to black people or being anti-Semitic?
Yeah.
What Christians would tell you is all of that is wrong and sinful, but on the one hand, you are being racist against God's chosen, so that's got to be worse.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. You know what I would say to that? And I want to get your opinion on this. I think Christians absolutely would feel that way about black people, about Jewish people, uncomfortable at offending them. But it seems like a lot of them have no problem offending Muslim people or offending brown people. You know what I mean? Like people from the Middle East. And I don't even blame them. You know who I blame? I blame this 20, 30 year unbelievable propaganda that has made Muslims the enemy. And by the way, I think it's kicking up in high gear again. I think after a nice lull, you had 9/11, you had the war on terror, weapons of mass destruction, Islam's the enemy. I am seeing it fire up again from guys like Charlie Kirk, from Officer Tatum, from all these guys who are basically painting the Muslim world again as the enemy. They're refiring up the 2001 neocon playbook and the Project for the New American Century and all of those neoconservatives whom, by the way, I'm just learning now, they were all gigantic Zionists. And I'll tell you, Nick Fuentes connects those dots incredibly. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Was there a question in there?
I don't think there was a question in there. I think that was
because I agree with you. I'm glad you brought up the Project for a New American Century. That was one of the key moments leading up to 9/11 to get us involved in this 20-year, forever war, and to paint all Arab nations as the enemy and the Israeli state as America's outpost, and they're our shield. And if they don't stop them, all the Muslims are coming here. Interestingly enough, Orthodox rabbis will call Islam the broom of Israel, and they don't mind open borders in Britain, the UK, Sweden, the United States of America. That's why a guy like Alejandro Mayorkas, who was the head of the Department of Homeland Security, had an open border for so long. He's Jewish. And, the broom of Israel, we don't mind if other countries are muddy and weakened. As long as they're paying us and supporting us, they can remain weak, because we are going to have our capital of the world, as the first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, said, out of Israel. And there will be a one world standing army, one world government, one world police force, and a hall of the prophets right here in Jerusalem. It will be the capital of the world.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. The question is, guys like Mayorkas, did he do that on purpose and let all these immigrants in so then America could say, oh my God, look at this big immigrant problem that the Democrats caused. And now it's almost like a license to get rid of them. This is creating no different than, oh my God, look, the towers have fallen. It was 19 Muslim dudes with box cutters. We need to crush Muslims. Dude, it could be tied together.
That's why if a Jewish person gets attacked in the United States, every mainstream news source is there with video cameras trying to find out about the big anti-Semitic action that just took place. Was he Muslim? Was he Arab? And he might very well might have been. And you know what? Guys like Mayorkas and Laura Loomer and even people like Kaya Jones, even if they don't consciously do it, what they do is they say, yes, this is what we needed. Now we can get America to support Israel in Gaza again, or Israel against Syria again, or Israel in this Oded Yanon plan from 1982. And the Project for a New American Century, where they wanted to reshape the Middle East. We wanted to be involved in regime change in all of these countries. That's why 9/11, we didn't even go to where Osama bin Laden was. We went to, Afghanistan and Iraq, and there are all these questions about why are we even there? It was part of this Oded Yanon plan later. And it goes back to the Greater Israel Project again.
Yeah.
Which is centuries old. And people who are Christian Zionists would say, no, this is Old Testament old, and we're going to get it back.
Got it.
It's part of a plan.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little 9/11, because you actually are going to, where are you going? Philadelphia? Oh, your hair looks nice.
No, dude, I'm going to Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Okay. All right. So, man, there's a lot of 9/11 stuff back in the mix. And I'll tell you, you connected me with Richard Gage. That was an amazing interview that you did with him. I think I did a good interview with him. And every time I post a Richard Gage clip, man, that thing gets a lot of activity. Ironically, more on Facebook, which has the Deep Shallow Dive Facebook is more baby boomers. Like, I've got more boomers there. And then the Instagram is probably more millennials, Gen Z, and then even Gen X. But man, when I post a Richard Gage thing on Facebook, it's thousands of comments, and 9/11 is back up for discussion. And then tell us about what you're going to.
Yeah. So I was told by a friend who's involved in the 9/11 truth movement, Gene Laratonda. He posted about it. I called him. It's called The Tide is Turning, 24 years since 9/11. And they actually, for the first time, have former congressmen, former senators who unfortunately are no longer senators and congressmen. But it's almost like they can't actually say it, or they'll get booted because they're part of the machine, which can't question 9/11, But they have those guys. They have, these national heads of fire departments, all of these people that have not only questions, but they've done real research on their own, all coming together to hopefully make a loud noise in Washington, D.C., get the attention of the existing politicians. They're going to have a day fully on the Pentagon, what happened there. Obviously, Richard Gage is going to give his presentation. I get a chance to tell my own story of being a guy who believed everybody that questioned 9/11 must be some kind of far left radical, Michael Moore follower, like the filmmaker. But how I had my own awakening just based on research and discovering truth and weighing that against what I was told by the mainstream. And it fell completely flat in the face of these new facts. And it's like, okay, do I want to be honest with myself or do I want to feel comfortable? You know? So I get a chance to introduce JSlayUSA from there. I'll be live streaming when they get off the stage from speaking. They'll come to my table. I will ask them. I'm gonna put their feet to the fire, because on the stage, I guarantee you, most of them, if not all of them, are not going to talk about who they think did it, because that's very unsafe.
Yeah,
they're probably going to talk about how jet fuel, it doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel beams. How did Building 7 fall? Those are great questions. They're great starter questions to get somebody thinking, I've been lied to.
Yeah.
I'm going to say questions like, after all of your time, dedication, and research, enough for you to be invited to a place like this, everybody asks the question, who do you think did it? Who benefited? Who really benefited?
Yeah.
Who do you think benefited? I won't even say who did it. Who benefited? Because if you've done any modicum amount of research, it all points in one direction.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yes, it does. And you know what, audience? We're not even going to say what the direction is, because you should know it by now. You really should. Okay, that's super cool. I know, former Congressman Kurt Weldon's going to be there. That guy's an interesting guy. Richard Gage is fascinating. I actually am surprised he's not a bigger voice and name in this. And I've been surprised he hasn't been able to get on a Tucker Carlson or a Joe Rogan. He's been on a bunch of other things, but man, that guy he brings receipts. Holy mackerel, does he bring receipts. And he's an architect that's able to help you understand. To me, the two big ones, aside from who did it, you're right. That's the biggest question. But the biggest thing that makes no sense is Building 7 and then the Pentagon. And actually, even the plane that fell in the Pennsylvania woods, I think that was United Flight 93 or something. My question is always, where's the plane? Where's the engine? Where's the fuselage? Where's a wing? Where's a seat? Every other plane crash that you see, when a plane falls in the Congo, all of a sudden you see a giant wing, you see half an engine, you see a granola bar wrapper. You know what I mean? But with this, the only thing that seemed to survive was a passport, a Muslim passport that was in perfect shape.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. Man.
You know that the clothing channel, they've got a ton of followers. They do such great Instagram reels called Forbidden Clothes.
Forbidden Clothes. You
got to follow them. Hilarious reels that are truthful. They've come up with this superhero called Passport Man, and it's like a superhero, but he's covered in all these, like, the patchwork quilt of passports. All right.
Yeah.
And his, at the bottom, it's like stronger than steel.
That's hilarious.
Stronger than skyscraper steel.
Yeah.
But you're right. So I'll let those guys be the experts on nuts and bolts, engineering, architect, and I learned from all of it. And I could probably almost give a good presentation on that.
Totally.
And we're going to run short on time now, but I do have a presentation prepared, on who done it, and I can provide you the link, Ray, of the one I did a year ago. It's still very good. I would say if I had it to do over again, 80% of it would stay the same. 10%, I would say I was wrong on this, but here's where I've come to. And the other 10%, I was right, but I didn't go nearly far enough.
Interesting.
So, pretty good ratio. And I was in a pretty sharp place with this when I made it a year ago. Yeah. But when I posted that, which was called "Why I Believe Israel Did 9/11," I just straight up titled it that.
Wow, that's a straight up title.
Yeah, and so it's me, giving a presentation, but I'm showing all the receipts and evidence. And it's about an hour and 10 minutes. The Substack is the best version. That's the longest version. But that was a line in the sand. You put up something like that, and you go to a Christian Zionist type church, and that's who your people groups are. You're all of a sudden, your social responses are going to change.
No, that is an absolute line in the sand. So what was the reaction to that?
Mostly silence but from the people that I don't know, people that are far enough away, because not all my following is Christian, but a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, I've never heard it put together this way. Thank you. I've always wanted to know who really benefited. This makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, most people don't even know that the four horsemen of the World Trade Center deal were four Jewish elite, three of which were billionaires, One of them was the head of the New York Port Authority and the New Jersey Port Authority, same guy. And they worked with each other to get this deal done, to turn it into a private owned building, which had never been done. And they got the largest terrorist insurance policy taken out on it right before the attacks happened. And then they got paid out by the new Jewish, Elliot Spitzer was the new Jewish governor of New York at the time. And he's the one that got Larry Silverstein those multiple billions of dollars in terrorism payouts. Where did they send that? Well, Ronald Lauder, who actually did the deal, who's the Estee Lauder billionaire guy who fought for the IDF like way back in the day. I mean, it's he opened a school in Israel that is known as a Mossad pipeline school because they develop agents for the Mossad. He sends a lot of the money that he got over there. And they named the school after him.
Who were the four horsemen? Larry Silverstein was one of them. You're saying the dude from Estee Lauder's another. Who are the other people involved?
Yeah, let me okay, so the four fabulous, I call them the Fab Four. You got Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy. All right. Silverstein and Lowy were the ones who purchased the buildings with a 99-year lease. So Silverstein spent about $600 million. Lowy spent about $125 million. Lowy got something called Westfield America. That's what he named it. That was the mall shopping area at the bottom.
Okay.
Silverstein got the office space going all the way up. Right.
Yeah.
And I'll add, people could say, just hearing this, well, hey, okay, Jewish people are heavily involved in business in New York.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, it's a coincidence, but it just happened that way. Now, when all of a sudden Lowy and Silverstein and their families, who always went and had breakfast at the towers, always, especially Silverstein, when all of a sudden that day at that time, he calls out, right?
Yes.
And doesn't go. And neither do his daughter, neither did his son, neither did Frank Lowy. None of them went in. Then the towers fall. Then there's things like, okay, well, that's super coincidental. And now that you find out they're all tied to like Ehud Barak, Benjamin Netanyahu, they've all got relationships with the prime ministers in Israel.
Yeah.
Then you think, didn't Netanyahu write in his book about the World Trade Centers getting attacked with a bomb if we let Islamic terrorism continue or something?
Right.
So it keeps going and keeps going. Yeah. Then, okay, maybe just the biggest coincidence ever. Oh, but then Building 7 fell at free fall speed into its own footprint and no plane hit it. And that building is where they were doing research on the $2.6 trillion that the Pentagon lost. Like that was one of the places they're doing that.
Yes.
Huh.
I think Building 7 and then the exact spot in the Pentagon that it got hit was where all the paperwork was on the $2.6 trillion.
That's what they were auditing.
They were auditing. Yeah. And then Donald Rumsfeld, who you mentioned earlier, he gave a speech on September 10th, standing in front of that exact spot in the Pentagon, talking about how we can't track $2.6 trillion and our floors can't communicate floor to floor. Man, it's diabolical. It's diabolical. But you know what? It is all coming out. And I have a feeling this event you're going to, gosh, we might have to have you back on to give us a post-mortem on this. I hope it comes out more. I really do. I hope it comes out more. And I hope this isn't just another talking smack fest of the same things everybody already knows,
Yeah. Well, while I'm there, I'm hoping to land some interviews with people that aren't currently a part of the event, like Marjorie Taylor Greene or others who might be in DC at the time. Are you going to put this out before September 9th, this video?
I will put this out before September 9th.
Great. So I'll ask if people want to send Ray in his comments or find me, JSlayUSA, please find me, follow me on Substack or Rumble or Instagram. If you've got an idea of someone not just some random researcher, but someone who has some clout that is in the DC area, let me know, connect us, because I'm looking to fill the time during the day. I mean, I'll fill the time, but I'll never turn away a great idea.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So listen, everybody, if you guys know anybody that's in the DC area that might be of value, either reach out to me or feel free to reach out to JSlay directly and get him that information to make those connections. All right. That's cool. All right, dude. Anything else, man? Today was just a shoot the shit podcast.
It really was.
Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any other thoughts, feelings?
Well, yeah, one, I think this is important. This is something I've come to recently. And it's so self-evident, self-explanatory. We may be in a system right now that I think might have these certain groups of people that have massive control, and we don't like where their head's at. We don't like their plan. We don't like what they're doing. And yes, we can learn a lot about it, and we can spread truth. And maybe there are revolutions that can take place and happen. Do I think that the Federal Reserve is going to be taken down right after everybody gets wise to it? No, because I think the Federal Reserve would punish America by making us go into the worst depression we've ever seen if we dared. So there's some safeguards in place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the elites. So in the meantime, while we're researching these things, let's live the best life we can without constantly being a complainer. We don't need to let complaints and negativity enter into our spirit and affect how we're husbands, how we're fathers, how we involve ourselves on our podcast or in our community.
Yeah.
This may sound like platitudes, but it's not, because we still have a real life to live right now for me in Tennessee that has very little to do with what happens in Gaza right now. And I hate it. And that's why I talk about it, but I can't carry that with me all the time. I still have, a life to live and kids to raise and these things, which are very good and important things that I have direct control over. So we still have personal autonomy. We still have control over our lives to a large degree. And let's make the most of it, because if we spend all our time just calling out the problem, that kind of becomes who we are. And that can't be good for our spirits.
No, you're absolutely right. And that creates a lot of negativity. And I've found myself going through a lot of those battles. And even the amount of time I'm spending on social media, I've tried to really kind of curb that back and just have a little more balance. Now, at the same time, whether we're able to impact major change or not, speaking our truth, that's definitely something that I think more people need to continue to do.
Yes.
But at the same time, you do have to balance that with enjoying your life, really. And again, I'm totally guilty of that in a lot of ways. So that was very well said. And I'm gonna heed your advice as well. All right, buddy. Listen, looking forward to getting you back on post your trip to DC. Always enjoy talking to you. I really have learned a lot from you. I really do. And I genuinely mean this. And I've told you before, I think when you and I first connected, I don't know what you thought of me at first, because again, this is real talk. You said a couple things and I was like, this guy doesn't even like me or something. I don't know. I don't even know why I thought that. It probably was in my head. But
well, I think I actually liked your I kept seeing Deep Shallow Dive, but at this time you weren't putting your face on screen.
That's right.
And, but I liked what you had to say. And I think I may have I don't know who first reached out to the other one.
Yeah.
But I don't remember ever feeling any ill will or.
I think that would, no, it wasn't ill. Oh, you know what it was? I'll be very honest. And I've had this with some other people, because I'm not Christian or not religious. Sometimes I feel like non-Christians might, I don't know, not like that. And honestly, that's probably in my own head. That's probably my own insecurity about where I fall out on a religion. Ironically, I feel the same way with some Muslim people who are super Muslim, and they're like, well, you're not really practicing. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't feel I need to align myself that way. So that's probably my own insecurity and in my own head. But honestly, man, you and Scott Sieverts from Burn Pit and a few others, I just have learned so much from, and I enjoy your content so much, and I enjoy your perspective. And I think it's incredible that you guys are, people that, in my mind, I refer to you as like true white America. And like, and I mean that as a compliment, because that's what you are. You're like white dudes. And it's so cool for me to see white dudes basically in many ways going against the norm of things, and not even going against the norm, but speaking your truth. And I really do admire you for that. I think you always speak your truth, and it causes you to, lose people in your church, lose this, lose that, but you've stuck with it. And man, I really respect that. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise. Always enjoy talking to you, coming on your show. And I've already said it, but I really appreciate your open-minded approach. I do hope that you become a Christian.
Yeah, which is fair.
But at the same time, for me to be angry with you or think, you're on your own journey. You will make your own decisions. I can't force anybody to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's just, unfortunately, that's just how it is.
Absolutely. All right. Stay on the line. All right, everybody. JSlayUSA, my man, call a spade, call your parents. We'll have my guy back on. That's my new thing. I added call your parents to calling a spade. But anyway, all right, everybody, enjoy the day. We'll be back soon. Jeremy, stay on the line a second.
This episode was brought to you by Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less. Totally satisfying, discreet, and delicious. Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks are available in 6 great flavors, each containing at least 2 milligrams of nicotine to curb those cravings. Zippix is FDA registered and proudly made in the USA. Use discount code DSD for 10% off your order at zippixtoothpicks.com. Zip more, smoke less, save 10%.